So here's a question for you. How are you shaping your organizational culture? By design or by default? And if you're thinking, I'm not really sure, you're doing it by default,
Yep.
right? So you have a culture around you. And as a leader and as your executive team member, you are constantly interacting amongst yourselves and amongst the organization with thought patterns and with behavior sets that are getting you through the day and getting you moving forward. And that is your default organizational culture. And we as executive coaches and offsite facilitators are always noticing what are those thinking patterns and what are those behavior sets and what culture is being created here, either by design or by default. And so let's spend a little bit of time talking about what do we mean by culture. Well, an organizational culture is anything that you accept, expect, reinforce, or reward amongst yourselves and in the organization. And there's little microcultures at the executive team level that impact the broader organizational culture. And you know, Leanne, we walk into organizations, a lot of times we see statements on the wall about the type of organization that we are. And we notice that and say, great, that's the aspirational culture they're trying to create. And then we watch culture in action. What is actually going on? And particularly at the executive team level, because that's a huge influence on the rest of the organization, right? And so when we look at leaders and teams, they have preferences. You have preferences of how you like to behave, your basic thought patterns. And so the question that we are asking ourselves of that team and for the executives is, in what ways are those thinking patterns and those default behaviors influencing the behaviors of others? What kind of culture are you creating that's necessary for the organizational results you're looking for? And if you're short of them, we will bet that you need to do some work around organizational culture shaping so that you can step into the culture you need. And that is culture by design.
Yeah, for sure. And, you might think, well, if I'm going to design or shape my culture, that sounds like something HR should get involved in and have a whole strategic alignment and cultural transformation effort. And indeed, there are some very powerful and robust efforts that can be planned and launched enterprise-wide. And indeed, some of the organizations that we work with are doing just that. And it's exciting to see what's possible when an entire organization is very thoughtful about, given the rapidly changing landscape and our new strategy, this is not only the strategic direction that we want to go in, but the kind of culture that we will cultivate intentionally to attract, retain, and develop our people and really make a difference in the market. Really cool. However, in a lot of organizations, those efforts are not fully organized yet, or they're pivoting, or they may not extend down to the level of where you want to work with them on the day-to-day. And so the question becomes, if I am ready to become very intentional about shaping my culture by design, what are some simple practical things that I can do as an executive leader to begin shaping the culture around me? Of course, I can do it in one-on-one coaching. I can do it in my day-to-day and how I run my meetings. But are there other ways I can anchor the culture? Well, first of all, determine the culture that I want, and then secondly, anchor it. So we have 4 key, very practical steps that our executive leaders that we work with follow when they want to really become intentional about shaping their culture. And the first begins with the end in mind. From a business level, if you start, number 1, with identifying, let's say 2 or 3 years from now, the kind of not only market impact and business results that you're after, if you begin with that end in mind, you can first of all identify not only numbers, KPIs, and percentages, that sort of thing, but the quality of the brand impact, the quality of the impact on relationships in the community or stakeholders, or the way that you're shaping an industry. So that's number 1. Number 2, you backtrack. You do sort of backward planning and imagine, well, if these business results are happening 3 years from now, what would people need to be thinking, feeling, and doing consistently for those results to actualize? And it's likely, number three, then going to be a contrast. There's going to be some sort of gap between the mindsets and the skill sets, the ways of thinking, feeling, and acting in the future, and a current state reflection. Now, there might be some parallels, but it might be more nuanced, right? We're more masterful in the future. Or maybe it's a complete pivoting. So, for example, in a lot of organizations we work in, there's been, in the past, more of a reliance on it's either this way or that way, kind of either or thinking. And that's, of course, wonderful if we can get something so simple in a complex business challenge to be either this way or that way. But more often than not, we're dealing with competing demands and seemingly opposing forces that are actually mutually complementary. Like we need, improved financial efficiency and keep the quality high. We need to be globally integrated while locally differentiated. These are paradoxes. And so, and both ways of thinking is the new mindset that we need to not just like subscribe to at some philosophical abstract level. We need to help people think, feel, and act in ways that are mutually complementary. And that's dramatically different than how maybe many of us were raised or rewarded. So that would be an example of one of the shifts that we're looking for. So then number 4, after you've done the future state, current state gap analysis, is to identify the 3 ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving that might be necessary to make the biggest shift. So basically the 3 highest leverage shifts in mindsets or skill sets that would allow forward momentum to happen and the results to actually materialize. And so it might be something like this and both way of thinking. It might be something like a culture of experimentation and innovation. It might be a culture of courage. I don't know. These are a number of different themes that we've seen in different organizations. Whatever those 3 themes are, yes, of course, this can tie into broader enterprise-wide culture shaping efforts if they do exist in your organization. But you also have the power to design in smartly designed and facilitated patterns of interaction at the individual, the team, and the organizational, the business application level, as we do in all of our offsites, to ensure that people in the team begin practicing their way into new ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. When we bake this into our executive offsites, now we have an intentional way not only of shaping culture in that event, but we pull it through in the day-to-day and then pull it through in the next executive offsite. And now you've got a system that is practice, action, reflection, practice, action. It's a cycle of ongoing learning.
Absolutely. And so we would invite you to spend some devoted time thinking and reflecting on what is it about my organizational culture now that I'm experiencing? And is it by default or is it by design? And if it's by default, we would invite you to step into a better design that's purposeful for the environment you find yourself in. And if it is by design, how might you better design it to keep up with the business challenges and the opportunities that you will be confronted with, as you move forward in your business. So default or design, you decide. We encourage you to do it by design. Thanks for watching.